Discover 7 incredible and transformative sexual secrets of ancient Greece that will shock you. Linda couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of chaos. The bright lights of the school auditorium felt too harsh, too judgmental, as she prepared to present her findings on ancient practices that contradicted every value this small Midwestern town had instilled in her. The hidden journal of her late grandfather, a venerated professor of ancient Greek studies, had consumed her for weeks, revealing truths that bridged the chasm between past and present. What gave her pause was not just the content, it was the reality of what lay ahead. The classroom had erupted into heated discussions when Linda had first introduced the concepts. Faces of curiosity and shock mingled with scowls of disapproval. How could you? Fingers pointed and voices rose, leaving Linda with a heart laden under moments of silence. What had she done? Each revelation, a philosophical treatise wrapped in sexual exploration, dared her students to question everything. But the blowback from parents felt like dry ice, chilling her budding certainty. They had taken her words and twisted them into a weapon with which they attacked her very character, her commitment to morality. Think of the children. Her mentor had exclaimed publicly, his disappointment piercing straight through her. The destruction of trust stung more than any chastisement from the school board, he echoed, leaving her to grapple with the idea that the man who had nurtured her enthusiasm was now one of her fiercest critics. The intensity of her dilemma snowballed, twisted into the corners of her mind. Doubt turned her stomach into a knot as she wondered if fighting for historical truth was worth the risk of rupturing family bonds. By questioning the status quo and unveiling these ancient secrets, would she lose her voice or give it wings? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The forum, a terrifying climax of her odyssey, loomed ahead. Complexity brewed as she drafted her points, battling fear that threatened to siphon her resolve. Each word felt like a jab against the community consensus, a challenge to ingrained beliefs. Anxiety scratched at her intent. She fought to remember the trembling excitement that first led her to the journal. As she rehearsed her presentation, the walls of her modest home felt like they were closing in, the air thick with a mix of nostalgia and rebellion. With every passing hour, the weight of her mission mounted. There were whispers on the wind, warnings wrapped in polite smiles yet laced with razor-sharp glares. What if they were right? What if her grandfather's revelations were better left untouched? But the determination to turn back was overshadowed by an unmistakable spark. It had only been hers to ignite. As she stood in front of a gathering crowd, their anticipation palpable, threatening, electric anxiety coiled tighter. Just then, a voice flew from the back, sharp as a knife, interrupting her thoughts. A feeling of dread crept up her spine as Linda braced herself for the unknown. Staring out into hesitant faces, she knew this moment would either anchor her or send her spiraling. The only certainty. She was on the cusp of a revelation, one that might redefine not just her future but the mindset of an entire community. What would she say when met with that piercing challenge? How far could she push against the tide of tradition without losing what little she thought she had left? Linda inhaled deeply, the air around her thick with anticipation and tension. As the words of the unseen challenger hung in the auditorium, an overwhelming rush of adrenaline coursed through her veins. It felt as though the room had contracted into a singular focus, her. What would be her defense? Practicing the outline of her presentation had not prepared her for this visceral confrontation. Are you really advocating for these practices? The voice sliced through the murmur of the audience like a serrated knife. The accusatory tone infused the air with heat, igniting her doubts yet again. She briefly considered retreat, to retract her bold assertions, but those thoughts crumbled as quickly as they formed. No, she replied, her voice strong despite the quake within. I'm not advocating for anything except a deeper understanding of human history. The fervor in her response surprised her, a ripple of newfound conviction igniting against the backdrop of uncertainty. Each word felt like a stepping stone toward reclaiming the dialogue that had almost been stolen from her. The challenge revived both the weight of her grandfather's legacy and the passion that surged within her to unveil truths. As she glanced around the auditorium, she caught the gaze of students who had once been curious, then hostile, and now something else. Murmurs of reconsideration flashed across their faces. Perhaps they were ready for a conversation instead of an argument. "What's the point of all this?" a skeptical parent called out. "This information, where will it lead us? It's nothing but confusion." Linda squared her shoulders, despite feeling like a marionette tangled in strings of doubt. Confusion can be a door to enlightenment. The phrase burst forth, impassioned. These ancient practices challenge our perceptions, teach us about not just history but the complexities of relationships and identity that still resonate today. Ignoring them keeps us shackled in misunderstanding and fear. With that declaration, the room erupted into a symphony of conflicting voices. Some hurled disapproval while others voiced curiosity, and Linda felt as if she was caught in a whirlwind. Yet within that tempest, she found clarity. Each dissenting voice pushed her further, compelled her to articulate her purpose clearer. People used to think the earth was flat. Consensus doesn't always reflect truth. She pressed on, excitement building yet finding her rhythm. It felt like a dance with her opposition, twisting, turning, addressing each point of resistance. What if we step back and allow ourselves to learn from these ancient practices? Wouldn't we be doing a disservice by denying a rich tapestry that informs our lives? As her heart raced, Linda could see her mentor's eyes, gleaming with a mix of pride and desperation. He had turned from her fiercest supporter to an opposing force, and his expression now appeared as a silent plea for understanding, to see beyond his own fears. Drawing in the energy of the crowd, she continued, "Knowledge isn't always comfortable. Historical truths often clash with our values and norms. But if we don't engage with our past authentically, how can we learn to grow?" The atmosphere shifted, a tension still palpable yet tinged with growing curiosity. In that moment, Linda realized she stood at the nexus of transformation, not just for the audience but within herself. She was unearthing her own voice in a world that had sought to silence it, but the battle wasn't over. Dissenters remained, and her resolve felt fragile. The echoes of her community's expectations lingered, threatening to envelop her in their suffocating grip. As she closed her presentation, a final challenge pulsed in the very air she breathed. "Why risk it, Linda? Why risk everything?" it whispered in her mind. The question hung like a noose. What lay beyond this confrontation? Would pushing against the tide lead to liberation or alienation? And with that lingering tension, she offered a final thought: but what if the reward is so much more profound than we dare imagine? The auditorium fell silent, and all eyes riveted on her. A moment of dense clarity stretched between them, a collective breath held in anticipation of the aftermath. What would happen when the dust settled, and what boundaries would she cross in her pursuit of truth when she faced her next challenge? As the last echoes of her speech faded into silence, uncertainty settled over Linda like a heavy fog. The auditorium was now a battleground of sorts, the audience's expressions ranging from contemplation to defiance. She could sense the weight of expectations pressing against her, a collective gaze that demanded resolution. Yet, deep down, she felt the stirrings of something new, a potential spark of change that could ignite her future. Linda stepped down from the stage, her heart drumming nervously against her ribs. Outside, the clouds had rolled in, casting a dark shadow over the campus, matching the turmoil swirling within her. Her mind raced through the myriad responses she had seen during her presentation, the shifting tides of doubt and belief, the faces that flickered between clarity and confusion. Did I really reach them? She mused. Or did I merely amplify the divide? These questions spiraled within her thoughts, colliding in a tempest of vulnerability and ambition. Would she have the courage to continue challenging the boundaries set before her? Still processing the day's events, she found herself drawn to a secluded corner of the library, her sanctuary. The smell of old books enveloped her like an embrace, offering some sense of solace. As she leafed through a tome detailing the intricate tapestry of ancient philosophies, something caught her attention: the powerful stories of resilience against societal norms. A particular passage resonated deeply, revealing how ancient philosophers questioned conventions, their courage illuminating paths for others. This literary fare fueled her conviction, priming her for the battles yet to come. She realized that embracing discomfort was an integral part of progress. Her phone buzzed with an incoming message, interrupting her reverie. It was from a former classmate, Millie, whom she hadn't spoken to in years. "We need to talk. I heard about your presentation. Call me." The weight of expectation shifted. Who would have thought that a few words spoken in a moment of vulnerability could ripple outward, affecting others? Intrigued yet anxious, Linda dialed the number. "Millie?" she greeted when her friend picked up. "Hey. I just had to say, you were incredible up there. But how are you really feeling?" It was a simple question, yet her heart constricted. Linda hesitated, caught off guard by the intimacy woven through Millie's inquiry. "Honestly? I'm scared. I'm scared of backlash. But I'm also excited, maybe for the first time in a long while." "Good. You should be. But how do you plan to move forward?" Millie's voice flowed with encouragement, and Linda sensed the potential of support where she least expected it. "I think I need to push harder. The topics I presented, it's just the beginning. I want to create deeper discussions, show people the value in understanding ancient practices. But I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff." Millie chuckled gently. "Then jump. Find the wings later. That's where real growth happens." The call dropped, leaving Linda in a state of contemplative empowerment, a feeling that wouldn't wane. She retrieved a journal from her backpack, flicking through pages already scrawled with her thoughts, ideas, and reservations. Almost unconsciously, she began to frame her next steps, clarifying her ambition in ink. With renewed determination, she set her sights on creating a series of discussions, workshops that would invite open dialogue about the uncomfortable and challenging topics inspired by the past. It was a way to challenge prevailing narratives directly, and more importantly, to cultivate a space where others could join her journey. Just as the last lines formed, a chilling thought gripped her. What if my journey becomes a beacon or target for people who oppose me? What if I expose myself to ridicule? Fear flickered like a dark shadow, threatening to dampen her resolve. Yet she also recognized a growing thrill within that fear, a deep desire to break free from the shackles of complacency. The desire to forge ahead burned bright, a path ridden with uncertainty but peppered with hope. Suddenly, with her heart racing, Linda realized that by embracing this journey, she was not merely defending the past but reshaping her future. She would confront her fears, one discussion at a time, creating a foundation of resilience that could withstand any storm. With her pen poised above the page, she wrote a single word: begin. And as she prepared for the road that lay ahead, an emerging insight whispered through her, challenging her once more: could she truly become the voice of change, shattering the silence perpetuated by fear? She closed the journal, knowing that the journey was just beginning, and with a new resolve, she stepped back into the world, ready for whatever challenge awaited her next. Linda spent the next few days in a whirlwind of thoughts and preparations. Each morning began with an increasing sense of purpose. She wove her vision into tangible plans, hoping to create discussions that would resonate just as her speech had. Each presentation scenario danced in her mind. Small groups huddled in open dialogue about historical perspectives, drawing parallels to contemporary issues. Yet, with each fleeting moment of inspiration came a pang of trepidation. Could she navigate the pushback she might inevitably face? In contrast to her soaring ambitions, the gnawing fear of vulnerability felt like an anchor. She felt herself teetering on a precipice of self-doubt and anticipation. Instead of burying those feelings, she summoned them. Linda turned to her journal again, pouring her thoughts onto the pages. She knew it was time to turn theory into practice, to take that metaphorical leap Millie had urged her towards. The decision to host her first informal workshop settled heavily on her shoulders. An invitation on social media was crafted, a simple message: join me in discussing the stories and insights from ancient Greek philosophy. How can they reshape our thoughts on today's issues? It was inviting yet daunting. She wrestled with the impulse to second-guess every word, wanting to ensure her message would connect, disarm, and engage. As responses trickled in, some eager, others skeptical, Linda felt the traditional roles of her social circles begin to shift. Conversations that once revolved around mundane daily concerns began to encompass deeper and more reflective exchanges. The buzz around her workshop surged, and with it, the pressure intensified. On the day of the workshop, anxiety gripped her as she set up the room, the soft hum of anticipation intertwining with her trepidation. Chairs were arranged in a circle, a symbolic gesture of inclusivity she hoped would foster dialogue. Yet, as participants began to arrive, each face bore a unique blend of curiosity and skepticism that mirrored her own feelings. Is this really what they want? She questioned internally. The hasty murmurs of anticipation did little to soothe her racing heart. Could she lead this conversation without losing her footing? As the last guest settled into their seat, an unexpected surge of determination coursed through her. Linda began, sharing not just facts and figures but the stories that had moved her, the ancient philosophers who, against a tide of conformity, transformed their societies. With each shared insight, she noticed reactions bloom across the circle, nods of understanding, expressions of contemplation, and occasionally those furrowed brows of skepticism that she anticipated. In that moment, a palpable shift occurred. Participants didn't just listen, they engaged, challenged, and expanded on her ideas. It morphed from Linda's singular journey into a collaborative exploration. A previously reserved individual spoke up about their own experiences of courage and defiance against societal norms, igniting a flame of open conversation that danced through the group. Linda felt her pulse quicken, not from anxiety but exhilaration. The fears that had threatened to stifle her found their antidote in collective engagement. Her inhibitions faded, and she realized she didn't have to be the sole voice of change. Together, they could amplify their impact. As the workshop unfolded, she witnessed the gradual unearthing of perspectives, the exchange of ideas forging connections that seemed to be missing before. It wasn't just about ancient wisdom anymore, it was about real-world application, wrapping historical insights around the contemporary dilemmas they all faced. When the session came to a close, it was marked by a sense of community that Linda had longed for, a subtle acknowledgement that their discussions bore the potential for growth and transformation. Yet even as she celebrated this success, a flinch of doubt lingered within her. How would this be received by those expected to push back? What would happen when the discussion left the intimacy of the workshop? The question loomed over her, but a flicker of readiness surged beneath that doubt. Reinvigorated by her first effort, she closed the session with an open-ended invitation. "Let us keep this conversation going," she encouraged, spirited anticipation sparking in her chest. But just as she turned to gather her belongings, a sharp voice sliced through the warmth of her newfound confidence. "You think history has all the answers?" The challenging tone belonged to someone she recognized from the audience, someone whose skepticism had been apparent throughout. The moment had come for confrontation, and she understood that her path to change wouldn't always be smooth. It would require responding not just with facts but embodying the essence of the conversations she sought to cultivate. As discomfort began to creep in once more, she sensed resilience bubbling to the surface, a newfound readiness to engage with the resistance, both within and around her. Linda's heart raced as she prepared to face this unexpected challenge head-on, diving deeper into the uncertainty that lay ahead, moving closer to the transformative growth she sought. She had entered this journey for answers, but now she would have to confront the conflict head-on. The next steps loomed larger than life. Would she galvanize her commitment to challenge, or would she retreat in fear? The stakes had never felt higher. As the workshop's energy shifted abruptly with the question hanging thick in the air, Linda's mind raced. The challenge had come not just from a participant, it felt personal, as if it were a direct hit at her very foundation. She steadied herself, drawing upon the determination that motivated her to initiate this dialogue in the first place. "That's a fair point," she began, surprising herself with her tone calm, yet infused with a budding confidence. "History isn't a definitive map to our answers, it's a reflection of humanity. It's complex, messy, and often contradictory. But have we considered how we might glean insights from it to inform our current struggles? The room quieted, all eyes on her. Linda noticed the mixed expressions of curiosity and skepticism intertwining. This was the very moment where academic ideology met lived experience. The voice of dissent wasn't a barrier, it was an opportunity for escalation. She felt a rush of energy igniting her words. Engaging deeply with her audience was no longer about demonstrating her command of facts, it was about inviting them to participate in a dynamic exchange. What if we unpacked the stories behind the philosophers instead of just citing their doctrines? When they spoke against the norms of their time, they didn't always have the consensus on their side. They faltered, too. But they pressed on, often inspired by the uncertainty that surrounded them. Linda could see the gears turning in her listeners' minds. The facilitator who feared rejection now wielded the potential to reshape the dialogue, inviting questions that had previously gone unasked. She pressed on, weaving anecdotes from ancient philosophical debates with modern dilemmas, detailing the courage it took to voice dissent and challenging prevailing philosophies. The participant who had spoken previously, a man whose skepticism had been palpable, raised his hand again. But aren't we romanticizing those thinkers? They might not hold the relevance we think they do. His tone wasn't defensive, it was curious, almost inviting further challenge. This time, Linda smiled. Here was the intersection of her mission and her growth facing resistance with openness. What if we acknowledge that even their ideas, while profound, are products of their time? What matters is that those ideas provoke our current understanding, which often need refining through real-world experiences. At that moment, a ripple of agreement emerged, creating a wave of dialogue across the group. Participants began articulating personal experiences that echoed the tension between historical context and modern identity. Linda found herself slipping into a rhythm, responding, weaving individual insights back into the broader conversation. Yet, just as she began to feel the conversation flow effortlessly, a flicker of anxiety flickered through her consciousness. A voice in her head warned her that this moment of connection might ultimately lead to greater vulnerability. What about those who remained unconvinced? Would they retaliate when their skepticism grew bolder? Assessing her own emotions, she realized this was the essence of risk, that discomfort thrived where growth also resided. With each exchange, she saw not just a room full of individuals, but a community of potential allies willing to engage in the complexities of life, history, and the essence of being human. The workshop ended on a note of excitement, with participants promising to continue the discussions in their own lives. Linda left the space feeling transformed, carrying a newfound respect for the ambiguity of dialogue and the strength found in collaboration, even amid dissent. After gathering her belongings and walking away from the session, the buzz of conversation still echoed in her mind. She felt empowered, yet the question from earlier raced back, a haunting refrain: what happens next? Doubt crept back in, feeding the part of her that still feared rejection in a broader context. The real test awaited her, confronting her critics beyond this protected space where she had found camaraderie. Emboldened yet trembling at the prospect, Linda realized she was closer than ever to a pivotal moment of her journey. She needed to reach wider, push further, and open herself to the deeper transformative narratives waiting on the horizon. The very conflict she once dreaded, the discomfort of challenge, might indeed be the catalyst she needed to ignite the change she sought. Uncertain but resolute, she understood that her path ahead would push her to integrate her newfound voice into realms she had skirted before. The time had come to fully inhabit that role, to share her own experiences woven through the fabric of history. Yet, just as she decided, a familiar anxiety washed over her. Would her voice truly matter in a landscape so riddled with contention? The thought hit her hard, leaving a trail of urgency behind. As she prepared for the next step, she recognized this was no ordinary confrontation, it was an opportunity, a call to face the moments of truth that would define her journey. Would she rise, or succumb to the weight of fear? She took a deep breath, setting her resolve anew. The next chapter loomed ahead like a darkened door, masking the potential for an enlightenment she so desperately sought. How she would choose to walk through it would determine not just her future, but perhaps ignite embers in the hearts of those willing to dream alongside her. The days following the workshop blurred together as Linda oscillated between elation and dread. Each morning brought an intense urge to push forward, yet her feet felt glued to the ground, hesitant to tread into territories fraught with uncertainty. Her newfound confidence was a double-edged sword, sharp enough to propel her but also piercing enough to awaken doubts she thought long buried. Preparing for her next speaking engagement, something shifted within. She sat in her cozy living room, sifting through her notes, but the familiar walls began to feel confining. The pieces she had crafted in her workshop felt abstract, detached from the raw, emotion-fueled narrative she yearned to present. What was it about history that really propelled her? What raw vibrancy lay beneath the polished surface of her speech? Sighing, she drew her notebook closer, pen poised. She began jotting down thoughts, allowing her hand to move without inhibition. Ideas flowed, even the chaotic ones, her own childhood experiences, echoes of disappointment, moments when she felt history repeating itself in her life. With every line she wrote, she felt a tapestry forming, woven with the threads of her personal journey and the grand narrative she'd dissected. Each phrase began unearthing a truth, an understanding that, perhaps, her story bore more weight than she realized, yet in the stillness of her apartment, an anxiety rumbled within. Would this vulnerability resonate? Would people truly gather around her narrative, or would they see it as just noise? The fear of ridicule loomed like a specter, urging her to retreat to the safety of sterile academia, where statistics reigned and lived experiences were mere footnotes. She shut the notebook, eyeing the mess of papers on the table. It was messy, just like her thoughts. Linda realized this chaos mirrored her professional journey, a beautifully imperfect process. She reflected on her workshop, where bold exchanges had sparked engagement. Maybe it wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present and genuine. By sharing her vulnerabilities, she could create a bridge through which others might step forward. That evening, as she prepared for bed, Linda's determination resurfaced. She would integrate herself into her upcoming speech, her struggles, realizations, and aspirations. It was time to shed the facade of the expert who needed to have all the answers. Instead, she would arrive as a fellow traveler on a winding road of exploration, willing to embrace the uncertainties of both her audiences and her own journey. With newfound clarity, Linda crafted an outline infused with personal anecdotes intertwined with historical narratives. Each tale she chose had a purpose, a heart-pounding relevance expecting to echo through the room. She named her speech Voices Through Time, the courage of struggle, a nod not just to history but to her evolving relationship with it. The day of the event dawned clear and bright. As she stood backstage, sweaty palms gripping her notes, Linda gazed at the audience, familiar and yet foreign. She could feel the current of anticipation humming through the crowd, and an unexpected thrill washed over her. This was her moment. Taking a deep breath, Linda stepped onto the stage, the spotlight warm on her skin. The murmurs of the crowd quieted, waiting. She opened her mouth to begin, and in that instant, her heart raced not with fear, but with excitement. Yet just as she commenced her opening words, she caught a glimpse of a figure in the audience, a familiar face filled with skepticism, the very man who had challenged her in the workshop. An unsettling sensation gripped her gut. Would he question her again? Did she even believe what she was trying to present? The moment hung suspended, full of promise and threat, the crossroads of potential igniting both her passion and dread. And as she continued, only one thought resonated in her mind: this was the true test of her resolve, the demonstration of her courage, woven through time itself. What would happen if she embraced the challenge? Head on. Uneasily yet resolutely, she pressed forward into the unfolding narrative, ready to face whatever came next. Would her authenticity forge connections, or would it be met with scorn? A murmur of uncertainty rippled through her once again as she rose to the occasion, preparing to confront her deepest fears in a manner she hadn't expected. Linda inhaled deeply, immersing herself in the warmth of the light illuminating her. It wasn't the perfect time, but it was hers. Her heart thudded rhythmically as she steadied her thoughts, wrestling with the nervous energy that threatened to spill over. The figure in the audience, the man with the discerning gaze, loomed large in her mind, but she urged herself to focus on her message, the truths she had woven together like strands in a tapestry. With her voice steady but earnest, she began, sharing the first threads of her story, her childhood, the disconnection she had felt, and the moments when history swirled around her like a hurricane. Each story cascaded into the next, personal and vulnerable, forcing her to confront shadows that had haunted her. A sense of empowerment surged through her with each word. The initial silence of the audience shifted, morphing into a charged energy that wrapped around her like a warm embrace. As she shared how certain historical events mirrored her own struggles, she found solace in the connection that began to flourish in the room. Faces changed from skepticism to softened interest. Their attention started to pull her deeper, anchoring her confidence. She recalled a time when failures had felt like anchors dragging her to the depths of despair, moments that echoed the perseverance required throughout history. With every anecdote, she revealed pieces of herself that had long been locked away. Careful not to overanalyze, she simply spoke. This candidness opened a door, one she had once feared would remain shut, but just as she hit her stride, her gaze drifted back to the man. His expression remained inscrutable, a stark reminder of internal doubt. Would he find cracks in her narrative? Searing questions latched onto her mind, creating a cacophony of noise threatening to drown her words. She felt an urge to retreat, to slip back into the safety of statistics and sanitized academia, yet a stubborn flicker urged against it. Isn't it always the harshest critiques that illuminate our blind spots? Determined to shatter the crescendo of doubt, Linda recalled her intention. Her speech was not merely words strung together on a page, but a raw exploration of humanity and resilience. They both belonged to the same lineage of struggle. Hers was alive and pressing, theirs woven into the fabric of time. Embracing her vulnerability became the very foundation of her message. As she reached the apex of her story, Linda dove deeper, underscoring the importance of sharing one's narrative as a courageous act. It wasn't without risk. Authenticity opened one to criticism, but it was also a gift, allowing for a true connection that could heal, inspire, and bring forth understanding. In that moment, definite clarity emerged. Her struggles were universal, intricately tied to the historical threads she examined and cherished. The applause that erupted as she finished echoed through her, reverberating with a sweet vindication. It wasn't perfect, imperfections danced in the air, reminding her that growth happened in the messiness of life. But the way the audience connected with her words solidified something profound within her. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, faced her fears, and had emerged not just as a speaker, but as a storyteller, a torchbearer navigating through history with honesty and grace. As she left the stage, exhilaration mixing with exhaustion, her eyes once again caught the man's. He stood, clapping slowly, his features unreadable. Something shifted behind his gaze, a questioning perhaps, but a hint of respect mingled within it too. With every step back, the nervous uncertainty lessened. Yet, a new feeling surged, curiosity laced with a sense of challenge. What would that critique be? Would he offer insight or merely stand as a silent adversary? The world had opened up, but so had the possibilities of confrontation. What awaited her next was unclear, but a burgeoning ambition ignited within her. She could feel a tether pulling her back, urging her to evaluate not only her speech but the ongoing journey ahead. Striking while the iron was hot, Linda pondered her next move. What further explorations awaited her, and would this new insight ignite latent doubts or embolden her to push harder into uncharted territories? Only time would tell. The air was thick with the remnants of applause as Linda stepped off the stage, her heart still racing with the thrill of performance. Each cheer seemed to explode within her, altering her perception of what was previously possible. But beneath that exhilaration lay a paradox, an insistent question: had she truly convinced the man who now held her gaze, or was she still just a whisper in a cacophony of critique? As she walked toward the back of the auditorium, determination resonated within her. The journey of sharing her truth had unfurled a deeper sense of purpose. She needed to seek out more challenging topics, more profound narratives that resonated with not only her experiences but also those waiting to be uncovered in history. With a visible shudder of anticipation, she wondered what lay beyond her comfort zone. The hallway felt almost constrictive, sawdust and the smell of paint lingering from the venue's preparations. She glanced around, noticing the mingling attendees, some engaged in spirited discussions about the themes she had presented, while others seemed to dissect her words with scholarly precision. Linda overheard snippets of conversation, which ignited fresh ideas about how history echoed through contemporary experiences. Yet, doubt crept in, were her perspectives valid in this forum of intellectuals? She spotted the man, still lingering near the exit, talking to a small group. His stature conveyed authority, but the engagement in their conversation offered a glimpse of open-mindedness. Perhaps he was not as rigid as she had perceived. Her gut twisted with curiosity and dread. Could she approach him? The thought seemed reckless yet exhilarating. What insights could she absorb from someone so rooted in their understanding of history? Pulling the remnants of her newfound confidence around her like a shield, she approached. Each step was a mingling of excitement and anxiety, a testament to her resolve to expand her horizons. "Excuse me," she said, a slight tremor in her voice. The group turned to her, the man raising an eyebrow in surprise. His smile, however slight, offered a rare warmth. "You were formidable up there. I'm interested in perspectives that challenge the status quo." She held his gaze, wondering about the layers of depth behind his discerning eyes. "I was hoping to gain some feedback. I felt there might have been gaps in my narrative. How can I push boundaries further, bring more profound historical connections into my work?" His brow furrowed. "It's refreshing to see vulnerability, yet I sensed a hesitation at points. What holds you back?" The words pierced through her, forcing her to confront the reality of her internal battles. That vulnerability she had declared as a strength now felt like a potential chink in her armor. She had been so focused on the shared humanity within her stories that she had neglected to refine them into something sharper, more formidable. "I fear the harsh critiques people might wield," she admitted, voice dropping to a whisper. "It's daunting to find the right intersection between personal storytelling and historical significance." His expression softened with understanding. "Every narrative carries the weight of scrutiny, Linda. But consider this: a genuine connection often blossoms from discomfort. Push harder into your fears, don't let them dictate your journey. You might discover stories others dare not tell." As new resolve ignited in her spirit, Linda felt more than just admiration for this man. She felt an alliance forming across both time and struggle. Energy surged as they exchanged ideas about rich yet often overlooked narratives. Each suggestion he made awakened thoughts within her. What if she explored the histories hidden beneath the surface of common events? What if she divulged the complex layers of resilience that many never spoke of? As the conversation flowed, possibilities unfurled like waves in the ocean, both broad and profound. With each passing moment, Linda's confidence solidified, not only as a storyteller but as a catalyst for change in how her audience perceived history. Eventually, their dialogue concluded, but Linda left with more questions than answers. She sensed new directions opening before her, inviting her to navigate uncharted territory on the delicate intersection of personal experience and broader historical contexts. As she walked away, a familiar weight of anticipation mingled with excitement settled in her chest. What deeper truths awaited her in exploration? What narratives did she have yet to share that could change perspectives, not just hers, but others as well? Driven by the tempting call of opportunity, Linda resolved to dig deeper into the stories of resilience that transcended time. The moment of internal reckoning was upon her. Was she ready to confront the uncomfortable truths hidden within her past and the past of others? There was only one way to find out. The following days became a blur of reflection and action as Linda dove headfirst into her newly ignited passion for storytelling. Her once unshakable avoidance of uncomfortable truths began to haunt her, but it was a haunting that sparked a determination like never before. She rose each day with a resolve to unearth narratives that yearned for articulation, stories lost in the shadows and marginalia of history. She turned her attention to the forgotten corners of past societies, researching tales of resilience, especially those vibrating with the tension between personal experiences and collective histories. As she scoured academic journals and historical texts, the widening breadth of knowledge felt like an awakening. Each piece of information added layers to her understanding, deepening the connections she aimed to draw between history and contemporary issues. One afternoon, while sifting through archived articles at the local library, she stumbled upon a collection of forgotten biographies detailing the lives of marginalized figures throughout history. They had lived extraordinary lives amid adversity yet were relegated to obscurity. This was the fertile ground for her next work. These narratives were not just stories, they were lifelines to the human spirit. Fueled by excitement, Linda spent hours meticulously crafting outlines, structuring her thoughts about how best to present these lives within the broader swath of history. She envisioned weaving together disparate threads of personal and social challenges that would resonate with the present, yet, as she organized her ideas, doubts began to trickle in again, insidiously undermining her newfound enthusiasm. Critical voices echoed in her mind, reminding her of the scrutiny she had shied away from. What would colleagues think? Who was she to elevate these stories? This tension activated a chiaroscuro of determination and fear within her. Determination spurred action, and Linda decided she needed input beyond her evolving thoughts and budding outlines. She sought out the man from the auditorium, intrigued by his keen insights. After a few emails, they arranged to meet at a local cafe, a neutral ground where the weight of their discussion could find focus amid the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. As she sat waiting, she replayed their last conversation, particularly his encouragement to confront narratives that resonated through discomfort. What did that actually mean? Grappling with the notion, she glanced at her reflection in the cafe window, examining the emerging storyteller she was becoming. The woman staring back at her was not just a vessel for history, she was an active challenger of facades that oftentimes cloaked deeper truths. When he arrived, she felt a rush of anticipation. A conversation around pushing boundaries, she realized, wasn't just professional development, it was a vital component of her personal journey. She shared her research passionately, articulating her vision for connecting personal narratives with historical context, but as he listened, she could see the gears in his mind turning, evaluating her ideas. While these narratives are powerful, he said slowly, have you considered the risk of oversimplifying their complexities? It's easy to take shortcuts through emotional appeals. Your challenge is to resist that temptation and maintain their integrity. The feedback struck hard, a reminder of her ongoing wrestling match between authenticity and impact. Heart racing, she leaned forward. But how do I ensure respect for their stories without feeding into over-sentimentality while still engaging my audience? A momentary silence enveloped the table as the man reflected. You must question the very lens through which you engage your subjects. What biases do you carry that could cloud your narrative? Delve into your emotional responses and examine them, they might just be where the truth lies. Her pulse quickened, this was more than mere advice. This was an opportunity to discover facets of herself she hadn't fully explored. Who was she, really, in relation to the stories she wished to tell? Excitement surged alongside uncertainty, as if standing on the edge of an unknown abyss with only whispers of courage leading the way. Leaving the cafe, Linda felt both vulnerable and invigorated. This journey wasn't merely about amplifying forgotten voices, it was a profound exploration of her own identity intertwined with the histories she was compelled to narrate. The fear of confrontation now loomed larger than before, pushing her toward the precipice of self-discovery. But as she stepped outside, a thrilling notion punctured her thoughts. What if these histories she sought to uncover had deeper implications on her own past? What external truths might she be binding to her internal narratives? Determined to find out, Linda began mapping out a new course, one that would challenge her more than ever before. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was alive with potential. There were indeed shadows waiting to be lifted, and she was poised to dive into them headfirst. Would she emerge transformed, or would the weight of her discoveries crush her spirit? Only time would reveal the answer. The journey came full circle for Linda as she stood at the edge of her new beginning. The culmination of her months spent grappling with history, identity, and authenticity had brought her to a promising forefront. She was ready to present her most personal narrative yet. Hovering between anticipation and anxiety, she prepared for her first keynote speech, an opportunity crafted to elevate the voices of those faded by obscurity alongside her own lived experience. This was no longer an exploration of ancient philosophies and marginalized histories alone. This time, Linda would entwine her own struggles, encapsulating both the weight of the past and the personal culmination of her recent growth. She felt it glowing beneath the surface, an undeniable spark igniting within her both courage and clarity. The intimate confessions and emotional tribulations she had woven into her narrative were no longer hidden, they'd become windows through which she could connect deeply with her audience. As she entered the venue, a gathering buzzing with eager faces, she recalled the trepidation that had plagued her in the past. No longer did it silence her, instead, it propelled her forward. Here, within the warm glow of supportive energy, she stood as a testament to vulnerability and persistence, a living embodiment of a narrative that demanded to be told. She stepped onto the stage, her heartbeat drumming steadily in her chest. The microphone felt firm in her grasp, an extension of her commitment to shared truths. With the very first words, she drew her audience in, inviting them to not only witness the stories of those long silenced but to embark on an empathetic exploration alongside her. As she recounted the personal obstacles she had faced, alongside those whose stories had shaped her worldview, something remarkable happened. The room shifted from mere spectators to engaged participants. Expressions of empathy and recognition blossomed as she exposed her own fractures, moments of defeat that mirrored historical injustices and the fight for acknowledgement. Each pause in her speech was filled with a profound understanding, weaving a fabric rich in resonance. Linda articulated how she, too, had grappled with societal expectations, fears of backsliding, and a longing for authenticity amidst immense pressures to conform. Unraveling her journey prompted reflections from her audience, a realization that their histories were interlaced with hers. As she neared the end, she challenged them: the complexities of our stories don't exist in isolation, they resonate through generations. In confronting our discomfort, we create a bridge toward understanding, an invitation to embody our narratives rather than simply narrate them. With this final thought hanging in the air, the audience erupted into applause, each clap reverberating through her being. It was validation not merely from a room full of patrons, but an acknowledgement of her evolution into a voice of change. Linda had transcended the very fears that had once gripped her soul, emerging into the light of self-acceptance and competence. When the speech concluded, and she stepped off stage, she felt lighter, each cheer a feather lifting her spirit. Faces once filled with skepticism had transformed, reflecting newfound respect. The man who had challenged her in the past sought her out, a deep nod of appreciation exchanged between them. In this moment, she grasped that not only had she expanded her understanding of history but had also engaged meaningfully with her own vulnerabilities, prompting growth on both sides. The true exhilaration of fulfillment enveloped her. Linda knew this was not the end, but rather a launching point. She had discovered the delicate balance of sharing personal narratives while honoring those with historical significance, a testament to the promise of resilience and the unity of shared journeys. A sense of profound accomplishment settled within her. Not only had she redefined her relationship with history and the stories it holds, but she had emerged as a person ready to face her next challenge, one of continued exploration, connection, and empathy. Her path could lead to many places, but she was committed to making it a journey worth taking, armed with newfound confidence and purpose. It was time to share this transformative experience. Linda stood poised to carve out discussions, workshops, and dialogues that would continue to beckon others into the light of their narratives, urging them to embrace their stories as tools for understanding both themselves and their world. As she left the venue, the weight of her past became a source of strength, guiding her warmly into the future she was not just ready to face but eager to create. With every step, she proclaimed boldly to herself, this is a new beginning, not just for her, but for every voice yearning to be heard. And now, it's your moment to be part of this transformative journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can inspire change. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and propel more stories like Linda's into the world. Don't just observe, comment your reactions and theories about this powerful conclusion and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring resolution. You need to act now, show your support and be part of a community that values personal growth and authentic storytelling.